Hi guys, my name's Glenn. Welcome to my channel where I talk about aliens and crime and sometimes other things. I try and do a video every Tuesday and Friday, so if that's something that you might be interested in, consider subscribing. And with that, let's get into this week's video. Today we're going to be talking about the tragic murder of two backpackers in December 2018. Two young women, Louisa Jesperson and Marin ueland, were backpacking in Mount Tukbal, which is a mountain range in Morocco. It's just outside of Marrakesh, and they were hiking and they were brutally murdered by three men, as we'll come to discuss later. And yeah, we'll see a little bit. It was big news at the time, and we'll see a bit of that later as well. So let's give it a go. Louisa Jesperson, born December 5th, 1994, grew up in Denmark. She was a lovable character. Her friends say she was full of life. She was adventurous. She loved to explore the outdoors. She had a YouTube channel where she used to go out, and a lot of her adventures could be displayed there, and she was always seen happy, smiling, and she was loved by all her friends and family. Louisa attended Vestra School and became a gymnastics student before moving to Norway to study at university. Louisa met Marin while they both went to university at the Southeast University of Norway, where they were both studying outdoor recreation to become outdoor guides. Marin, born November the 23rd, 1990, grew up in Bern, a small lakeside town in Norway. She was described as shy as a child and not very outgoing, but she later grew up into an adventurous woman who loved to go in the outdoors, and she was, in the end of, when she became an adult, she was tough and she was not afraid of a challenge. She really enjoyed going outdoors a lot and hiking, and that was her main hobby. Marin was not very fond of holidays, and she would often go travelling in the holiday period. In years before, she went to Morocco with Louisa. She had been to Argentina and Peru around Christmas time. She wasn't really a big fan of the holidays season, and she wasn't really a materialistic girl. She really enjoyed just going in the outdoors. This year, Marin was excited to be going with her friend to travel. They were dead excited about this. They'd planned this for a while, and they were planning to go to Morocco for a month, seeing the sights. Louisa and Marin were planning to go to Morocco for a month, first spending a week in Marrakesh, doing a bit of sightseeing, doing a bit of tourist stuff, and then they were going to travel to Mount Tukbal and move toward the mountain. Mount Tukbal is a mountain range in Morocco. It's full of tourists, it's full of guides. It's a place that's been booming with tourism in recent years. And this was a perfect place for them to test their knowledge and to test what they wanted to be outdoor guides in the future. And so this fit right in with their interests. And they were really excited to go and take on this 13,000 foot ascent towards the top of this mountain and take on this challenge. On the 21st of November that year, Louisa posted a message to Facebook asking anyone if they knew any information or had any connections in Mount Tukbal that would be able to help them out in their journey and to help them out in their trek along the way. On December 16th, the girls arrived to Imlil, a small town on the outskirts of this mountain range, and they arrived there by taxi. Local people say quite late in the day. And they had their sights set to head off for the mountain straight away. And also they didn't choose to enlist a guide, which was not unusual for people like Marin and Louisa, because these guys were experienced backpackers and they were confident in their ability to take on this challenge. They knew their limits, they knew their skills, and they wasn't afraid to take on this challenge. I mean, they'd been preparing for this for a long time, and so, you know, it wasn't unusual for when experienced backpackers to go onto the mountain range unaccompanied. It's worth mentioning at this point that this is winter time in Morocco at this time of the year. It's very, very cold. There's nail-biting winds. It gets dark really early at this time of year, about 6:30 p.m. on that mountain range. It's going to be dark. These girls, though, Louisa and Marin, they were experienced backpackers, you know, and they were more than likely prepared for this, and they were confident in their ability to take on this challenge. and they more than likely could see what was coming and knew what was coming weather-wise. Leaving Imlil, the girls would have set off towards the mountain and first would have had to ascend up a narrow trail towards the small town of Arund, which is just at the foot of the mountain, and this marks the official start of the trail. From there, the path trails upwards some 13,000 feet towards the top of the mountain, and there is a refuge sat at around 10,000 feet. Now along the way there is some shops there, they're known as hanouts, and they're strewn sporadically across the mountainside. The girls were passed along the way by a number of guides and trekkers, all of which could confirm afterwards that they'd seen Louisa and Marin and that they were both happy and smiling. At this point, there was not a problem with these girls. The girls carried on, and we are not actually sure if the girls ever managed to summit the mountain or not. We don't actually know if they managed to get to the top or not. At the same time Louisa and Marin were navigating the Tukbal Trail, as it's known, 4 men from the outskirts of Marrakesh were approaching the mountainside, but they came from the opposite direction. At one of the mountain passes, the men crossed paths with a local guide called Brahim Bekena. Now, the local guide, he was accompanying 2 Danish tourists. Bekena not thinking anything of it, he shook hands with the guys, he greeted them, and he actually pointed them out to their local refuge, where the refuge was on the mountain. And he described these guys as local guys from Marrakesh who were in their 20s and 30s. What we do know is at some point the girls headed back down the mountain. Whether they made it at the top or not, at some point they headed back down. And on the way down the mountain, the girls passed the refuge at approximately 4 o'clock. Now, the refuge is approximately 4 hours away from the town in which they had set off, Imlil, a 4 hours walk away. Okay, but that town what we was talking about before, that Arund, see, that was only about a half-hour walk away from where the girls decided to pitch their tent that night. But it was dark, it was cold, and the risk of getting lost or hurt potentially was not worth it. Now, these girls, like I say, are experienced backpackers, so they decided that they were going to pitch their tent on the side of the mountain. They decided to go to pitch their tent near one of the local shops, near one of the hanouts that they previously went past. They might have thought that this was, a bit more of a secure area, a bit safer of a place. The man who runs the shop, that shop where the girls, closest to where the girls were found, he said that he left his shop at around 4 o'clock. So that's how we know the girls didn't get there. They wouldn't have got to that shop until around 6:30, gone. So it would have already been dark by the time the girls reach where they pitched their tent for the night. As the girls had pitched their tent and settled down for the night at around 7 p.m, the 4 men who were also descending the mountain laid eyes on the women. The girls likely hadn't noticed that the men had pitched their tent just a couple 100 feet down slope from when the girls had pitched theirs. It was around midnight when the men decided to attack. They entered the tent, and authorities have never told us which girl is which, but one of the girls was stabbed repeatedly while she was still in the tent. More than likely she didn't even know it was coming, and she was still sleeping when the attack took place. The other girl was dragged out of the tent and stabbed several times, and in a horrific act of brutality, the men beheaded the girl. The men, having committed this horrendous act, quickly fled the scene. The next morning, a French couple, tourists who was staying at the same town, Imlil, they had set off for an early morning hike. They wanted to get a good view of the sunrise in the morning, so they set off really early, and they soon reached the scene, and what they found was nothing short of horrifying.
We move now to a vicious, deadly attack on 2 young women who were on a camping trip in the mountains of Morocco. The
town was shocked. This is a tourist town, a big tourist area. A lot of money that are pouring into this town is from the tourists, and the locals, they like to take care of the tourists. And so for them, they couldn't believe what had happened, and a lot of people were just in utter shock.
Their alleged attackers claim to be members of ISIS. David Begnaud is following this.
The victims were on vacation together in Morocco. 24-year-old Louisa Jesperson from Denmark and 28-year-old Marin from Norway went to college together. Their bodies were found in a remote region where they were camping.
Police quickly arrived on the scene, and it didn't take long for them to bag a suspect. After the attack, the attackers were not very forward thinking, and in fact they had left their tent at the scene, and in the tent detectives found the ID of one Abderrahim Kayali. He was a 33-year-old plumber, and he lived in a slum just on the outskirts of Marrakesh. Now, he was apprehended just a few short hours after the murder of Louisa and Marin. 2 days later, in a disturbing video that was posted on the internet, on social media, it purported to show the stabbing and decapitation of one of the girls. In the background, a man declared that this was for ISIS, and this was revenge for attacks and defeats against ISIS in Syria. 2 days later, on December 19th, 3 more men were arrested in connection with the murder. They were arrested whilst they were attempting to travel out of Morocco by bus. They were trying to get to Libya to join ISIS, and still they had the murder weapons in their possession. Now, I'm probably going to butcher the names here, but Abdesamad Ajud, the alleged ringleader of the group, he'd previously been caught attempting to travel to Syria to join up with ISIS, and he actually spent a year in prison. Afterward, he got out of prison and he decided to join his local terror cell group, as you do. And so he joined that. A week before the murders, the 4 men had been filmed pledging allegiance to ISIS. According to detectives, the men were part of a terrorist cell that was being surveilled, and the 4 men had suspected that they'd been surveilled, quite rightly so, and so they decided to flee to Imlil, which, like I say, is a small remote town where it's harder for them to be tracked, and where they could carry out a gruesome attack, a terrorist attack on these tourists. On July the 18th, 2019, the 4 men, Abdesamed Ajud, who was 25, Younes Quazid, who's 27, Rashid Afati, 33, they admitted the murder, and they were all sentenced to death. Rashid Afati was the man who filmed the gruesome attack, and the other 2 were the men who perpetrated the attack. The 4th man, Abderrahim Kayali, he claims, and they all claim, that he didn't take part in this attack, and that he was there with him on the expedition, and he was there with him when he set the tent up, but he left before the attack took place. And so Abderrahim Kayali was sentenced to life in prison. In court, Abderrahim Kayali, he begged and pleaded for the death penalty. And well, you know, the court, they obliged and sentenced Abderrahim Kayali to death.
These 3 men have just been sentenced to death. They were found guilty of assassinating 2 Scandinavian women on a hiking trip in Morocco last December.
Louisa's mother was asking for the death penalty for the 3 men, and she got what she wanted. It's a fact-based verdict that respects the Moroccan and international law. It is consistent, and we are 100% satisfied when it comes to public action.
It was in Morocco's mountainous Atlas region that the 2 young women, Marin Ueland and Louisa Vesterager Jesperson, were abducted by the 3 men who claimed allegiance to the Islamic State group. They were later beheaded, with one of the men recording the assassination on a phone. Louisa's mother, who did not attend the trial in Morocco, says the death sentence means justice will be served.
It will bring some sort of justice to our daughters. They go around and kill people. Now they will feel what it's like to be sentenced to death. That's the bigger picture I try to focus on. Justice for our girls and our families. And to prevent them from killing again, of course.
Last May, 21 other men went on trial for the same case, including on counts of setting up a terror cell. They were all sentenced to between 5 years and life in prison. As for the three main culprits, although the death penalty is legal in Morocco, the country has had a de facto freeze on executions since 1993.
A total of 24 men were convicted that day of terrorist charges. These guys who were part of this terrorist cell who the authorities had been surveilling. A total of 24 men were convicted of terrorism charges on that day. Okay guys, that's it for today. Thank you for watching my video, and if you like my content, please consider subscribing. Until next time, you take care and bye-bye. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed my first video, why don't you consider subscribing to maybe see my second? That's it for today guys, thanks for watching, and if you do enjoy my content and enjoyed the video today, please consider liking and please consider subscribing to my channel. Until the next time, take care.